dog had been administered phenobarbital and Valium, but the treatment record for the dog had been altered.
Wendy's altered record showed that Peasy had been given a very large dose of phenobarbital. Investigators are certain that Wendy gave Mike the drug instead. They have their killer. Putting all the pieces of evidence together, they develop a timeline of the murder.
It seemed that the night that Wendy and Mike went out, he was most likely poisoned.
With their baby away at the sitters, investigators believe Wendy dropped tablets of pentobarbital into something Mike drank, knocking him out. Then, she took a syringe and gave her husband a fatal dose of phenobarbital. Wendy then dragged Mike's body to his pickup and drove to the ranch to dump him in the pond.
And at some point thereafter, learned about what would happen to that body, and went out there and added additional items to weigh him down, and stabbed the body to his pressure gas.
On September 22nd, 2005, Wendy Mae Davidson is charged with first-degree murder for killing her husband, Staff Sergeant Michael Severance.
Wendy told everyone that Mike deserted, and that was her error. But that backfired. It drew suspicion to her. It drew suspicion to the situation.
As Wendy's case moves toward trial, she continues to stick to her claim that she didn't kill her husband. But in October 2006, after realizing that the evidence was enough to convict her, Wendy waives her right to a trial.
And they allowed her to plead no contest, which is not admitting guilt. But the judge was very clear, said if you plead no contest, I'm still going to find you guilty of this crime.
Wendy Mae Davidson is sentenced to 25 years in a Texas state prison. She's up for parole in 2019. Her parents and her brother are never charged with any crime. In Maine, Mike's family still tries to make sense of the tragedy.
We lost a son, a brother, and in our eyes, a hero. I always joked he was my Superman. He was the one that I leaned on when I needed somebody to talk to. Now I don't have that.
And the like is there.
She took a loving man, a loving father, and a good friend to a lot of guys. She took that away from us.
On school breaks, Mike's son is allowed to visit his family in Maine.
Let's go up there and spend time. And that side of the family is letting his son know what kind of dad he doesn't have.
I wish Mike was here to see his child grow. He's a spitting image. I see a lot of his dad. I love my nephew. I just hope someday when he's older, we can be as close as me and his dad was.
In San Angelo, with one of their own now behind bars for a calculated and shocking murder, the community is still stunned. A tiny piece of that local Texas pride has been tarnished forever.
She was the local girl. It was a real difficult issue to deal with and to try to understand and grapple with. So it was just a huge event in the life of a community.
It's crazy. It's scary when somebody does something like that. 1 minute you have your good friend, and it's a blink of an eye, it's gone.
When Debbie Fagan is found shot in the head, the townsfolk of Monrovia, Maryland are alarmed that one of their own could be a cold-blooded killer.
It was pretty shocking, and it was something that no one knew how to handle.
Neighbors were surprised and I think grew a little uneasy when there wasn't an immediate arrest.
And when detectives dig deeper, they uncover a web of lies and a love
would also have to look at the current boyfriend.
I have to determine who's telling me the truth.
How well do you know your neighbors? What lies behind the white picket fences? Deep in the rustic heart of Frederick County,
The leg.
lies a hamlet of
The leg.
Once upon a time, this sleepy middle-class locale was where farmers came to buy goods and sell their grain.
Monrovia, when it was originally founded, started up around some sawmills and a flour mill, and it's kind of slowly transitioned away from that rural history.
These days, the wheat and dairy fields have largely given way to new housing developments as Monrovia becomes a bedroom community of the nation's capital.
A lot of commuters live there. It's much more economical to live in a place like Monrovia than it is down closer to Washington, D.C.
It's a nice, quiet area where there are nice, large homes, nice, large yards. People like to move there to raise a family.
That's perhaps why Debbie Fagan built her life here, along with her husband, Billy, and his 8-year-old son from a previous marriage, Billy Jr. And it wasn't long before their little family added 2 more to the mix when Heather and then Katie were born. Debbie's little sister, Kelly Apicella, raised her own children alongside them.
Debbie loved the kids, yeah, and she was very hands-on. She loved taking them to the zoo, Chuck E. Cheese.
But in 1991, after 10 years together, Debbie reflects on her marriage to Billy and decides things just aren't working.
She and her husband had been growing apart, and she decided to move out of her married home and in with her mother and her sister.
She brings her 2 young daughters along to live in nearby Imesville, Maryland, while Billy Jr., now a young man, stays with his dad. Debbie's co-worker and dear friend, Kathleen Kemp, was always there for her during these trying times.
Anyone that knew Debbie knew that she'd move on, that she'd move ahead. Debbie was a strong woman.
Debbie is a well-respected supervisor in the flood insurance industry.
Debbie was good about everything she did. She just had a knack. She worked hard. She knew what she wanted. She was articulate. There was a business sense about her.
To symbolize her new life, Debbie makes her first major independent purchase.
She was ecstatic when she bought her new car. We had made plans to even have a happy hour party afterward, just celebrating Debbie's new vehicle.
But for Debbie, the road ahead would be shorter than expected. On Monday, January 6, 1992, at 8:30 a.m., a surveyor is headed to his worksite on Ashcroft Terrace.
They were building houses there. The roadway had been laid, but construction was just in the very early stages.
Shortly after turning onto Ashcroft, he notices a car parked in the middle of the road.
It's strange because it's essentially a deserted construction road. There was nowhere to go at the end of the street.
The out-of-place sedan is shiny and new.
When he got close, he noticed that something's terribly wrong.
Can we get 2 waters? The back's all done. If you walk all the way in the backyard, you might be able to kind of tell.
The man immediately
No?
calls 911.
You even got to get farther away to see it.
Miles away.
If you go up there, it looks really good. Calories.
The dogs have those holes in the backyard. I'm just gonna
Oh,
walk out there. Because
okay.
it'll be my luck. I'll walk out there and step right down in one and twist my ankle. Because that's the kind of luck I have.
When Lee
He can
arrives at
have
the
fun
crime
with
scene,
that.
all he can help but start with the dead woman behind the
Yeah, he
wheel.
showed me
The car belonged to Debbie Fagan, who was 30 years old. She lived very close to the scene.
She was seatbelted in her seat. Her head was tilted to the left, and you can see that there was a gunshot wound to the right side of her head with exit wound to the left side of the head.
Police can quickly rule out suicide.
The police did not locate any weapon at the scene.
We knew then that we had a homicide, and we had to proceed further with our investigation to find out why the victim was in that location and what had occurred.
The inside of Debbie's car paints a violent picture of her final moments.
She had blunt force trauma to her forehead, which would have been consistent with being hit by something like a gun. Debbie's shirt was a little bit torn and disheveled, and some of the buttons were undone, and her shoes were off.
Our preliminary thoughts looking at the vehicle was that there was a person sitting in the passenger seat that struggled with the victim and then shot from the passenger seat.
Who was sitting next to Debbie? The car itself might yield some answers.
It was a brand new vehicle, it was only several days old, had 300 miles on the odometer, and we found hairs on the passenger seat and in the vehicle.
There's a good chance forensic testing on those hairs and any fingerprints found could lead to Debbie's killer. But who wanted to kill Debbie? At scenes like this, police always check for signs of robbery.
Someone
When police started looking around,
wanted to kill her.
that
Obviously,
the purse was in the back seat.
Inside, detectives find plenty of cash and a check for $150 made out to William R. Fagan.
Her purse was essentially intact, having the normal items that you would expect someone to have. There was no question that this was not a robbery.
Moving to the outside of the car, investigators comb through the glass shards on the pavement and get their first lead.
We found a metal jacketed bullet several feet away from the car.
The bullets came from either a .38 Special or a .357 Magnum revolver. Very similar size, and most .357 Magnums can fire any .38 Special caliber bullet.
It's not a robbery, and the killer was most likely inside the car. That means this crime might be personal.
There's no question that the shooter was up close with Debbie, and that would suggest to the investigators that perhaps this person was known to Debbie.
Was this possibly an abduction, a rape attempt, or was this some kind of an argument, or was this someone meeting a boyfriend?
Detectives asked that the medical examiner look for signs of sexual assault at the autopsy. Later that morning, investigators reach out to the neighbors in the area, hoping someone may have spotted something suspicious. In a tiny town like Monrovia, people notice when something's out of place.
Some of the witnesses saw an individual running along the roadway. This was not normal. They normally do not see joggers at 6:30 in the morning on their way to work.
This jogger did not seem to be wearing athletic gear. There was the gray hooded sweatshirt, dark pants. That person stuck out in the minds of several witnesses because it looked odd.
The man was spotted close to Debbie's car. Was he out for exercise, or was he fleeing the scene of a crime?
Sonic Summertime Chicken BLT has basil, aioli, and melty mozzarella.
It's like they took a BLT and turned it on its head.
Oh, wait a minute. Nope, mine's just upside down.
Oh,
There we go.
Oh, I thought we were upside down for a second.
Hurry in for Summertime BLTs. Order ahead for happy hour anytime.
I'm here with women who took the Pantene 14-day challenge and went from hashtag bad hair day to hashtag great hair day. America, are you ready to use Pantene and get two times more great hair days?
If your mouth is made to amaze, let Philips Sonicare give its care a raise. Get a month's worth of manual brushing in just 2 minutes. Philips Sonicare. Next level clean, next level care. There's always a way to make life better. Philips Sonicare.
I think I can. I think I can. I think I can. I think I can.
40 grams of protein, 0 grams of sugar, no artificial sweetness. I think
I can.
Why LensCrafters? Personalized services. Clarified digital eye exams. Eyeglasses with prescription lenses starting at $99. LensCrafters is why. Book an eye exam today.
now get 50% off all Domino's pizzas when you order online. 50% off sausage pizzas, handmade pan pizzas, even barbecue banana pepper pizzas. If you're into that, this week only get 50% off the menu price of 34 million pizza combinations at Domino's.com. When you're not able to smile, you become closed off. I felt withdrawn, alone.
Having to live with bad teeth for so long was extremely depressing. Now I know how happy I am. There's all those
feeling good about myself during this. I wish that I had gone to Aspen Dental on day one and not waited 3 years.
At Aspen Dental, we're all about yes. Like yes to flexible hours and payment options. Yes to free exam and extras for new patients without insurance. And yes, whenever you're ready to get started, we are too. Call now at 1-800-ASPEN Dental.
At Angie's List, we help you feel confident about hiring pros for home projects. You can check their ratings, read verified reviews, and easily request multiple quotes. Find all the pros you need to know at angieslist.com.
Zillow welcomes you home. Because we have the most listings and constant updates. So you never miss out on home you'll love.
First, liquid wart treatments, then early freezing. Now, Compound W introduces Nitro Freeze, the first nitrous oxide wart treatment that penetrates deeper for our highest cure rate in one use. Compound W Nitro Freeze.
You've lived. You've learned. You're a force. And menopause isn't going to change that. New Estrogen Complete Menopause Relief for all-in-one symptom relief that's proven to work.
Attention, if you owe money to the IRS, this is an urgent message. The IRS is cracking down this year by sending out heart-stopping letters, aggressively garnishing paychecks, seizing bank accounts, and putting liens on homes and businesses. They call it enforced compliance, and you better watch out, because penalties and interest on unpaid taxes compound daily, making it seem impossible to ever get out of debt. Don't let tax debt destroy your life. You need to call Optima Tax Relief, the #1 tax resolution firm. They are experts in the Fresh Start Initiative, one of the biggest breaks the IRS has ever offered. If you qualify, you could save thousands, even tens of thousands. Optima's resolved over $500 million of tax debt for their clients. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and will fight to get you the best deal possible. Call Optima now for a free consultation.
For your free consultation, call 800-632-8653. Optima Tax Relief.
I feel there's always been a darkness to Moscow.
Tonight, somebody had come to her house and shot her in the face. We saw some footprints going up the bank. The shoe literally fit, and we found her Cinderella. Just another lie, nearly come and go. We revealed a motive, which was very shocking and surprising.
Murder in the Heartland, all new, tonight at 10. Only on ID and ID Go.
It's January 6th, 1992. Just hours after 30-year-old Debbie Fagan is found shot to death in her car. And odds are she knew her killer. There's one potential suspect. Several neighbors saw a strange jogger in a gray hoodie around 6:30 a.m., the time Debbie was shot. In this tiny rural town of Monrovia, Maryland, residents are alarmed they may have crossed paths with a killer. This type of event would be shocking in a small place like Monrovia, a place where people leave their doors open, their kids run back and forth to each other's houses. To hear about a murder that occurred right up the street in this small town would have been a major moment. Shortly after 10 a.m., detectives head to Debbie's home to inform her family of their tragic loss. It's the worst part of the job. They speak with Debbie's stepson, 18-year-old Billy Fagan Jr.
No, she lives with her sister. Billy Jr. told the detectives that Debbie does not live there now, that she is separated from his dad.
Well, we need to speak with some family members. Yes, some unfortunate news.
Investigators gently explain that Debbie has been murdered.
What?
The young man stoically offers to contact his dad at work.
Billy Jr. called his father and told him that there had been an accident and that Debbie was involved. He asked his father to come home as soon as possible.
His father was a pipe fitter, and he was working for a contractor at the National Institute of Health. It's a 35 to 45-minute drive from Billy Sr.'s residence.
Meanwhile, Billy Jr. gives detectives Debbie's current address, and they head over to notify the rest of her family.
Hi. Are you Debbie Fagan's sister?
Yes.
Does she currently live here?
She does.
Okay.
had some bad news that, I mean, I can't remember their exact words, but, you know, they told me that she was gone. And that was...
Detectives are curious to know why Debbie was living there. Kelly says that at first, Debbie and Billy were great together. But in the years since, she noticed the couple's relationship starting to deteriorate.
He's a friendly guy, you know, but he was not a great husband to Debbie.
She talked about Billy as being someone who liked to drink beer, who liked to party, who was loud, who could be very aggressive, and he was kind of threatening to some people.
When she was with Billy, she kind of always acted like walking on eggshells, maybe, would be the best description for it.
Debbie was the one that made the money in the house. Billy was between jobs and wasn't always working, so Debbie was the person who was the breadwinner. Kelly told us that in September, Debbie made a decision to leave Billy.
When Debbie moved in with me and Mom, I hadn't seen her that happy in a long time.
He was pretty angry, and you know, he really wanted to try and win her back.
Kelly says that since they'd broken up, Debbie felt that every time she turned around, Billy was there.
Was Billy Scotland?
Billy would call quite a bit. If Debbie wasn't home, he'd want to know, well, where is she at? Whoever answered the phone didn't have the information. He would kind of get a little pissy with us.
To know where Debbie is.
Could Billy have taken his anger too far with Debbie? Detectives decide it's time to talk with her estranged husband. 2 hours later, they check back in at Billy's house. He's returned from work and in shock at the loss of his wife.
When was the last time you saw Debbie?
Billy said that the day before, he spoke to her on the phone, and she was to meet him that morning at 6:30 at her mother's house.
She was supposed to bring him a check for her share of a debt owed to the IRS. Billy stated that Debbie never showed when she was supposed to show up, and after waiting for a period of time, he gave up and drove off.
Billy's timeline gives detectives pause. It seems Debbie was supposed to meet her husband right around the time she was killed.
No. I used to have a shotgun, but I got rid of it years ago. Worried about having it here with kids.
Mind if we look around a bit?
Help.
I wanted to see that if there was any kind of indication that something may have happened at his house, that maybe the victim was there prior to being found.
Investigators search, but don't find signs of a struggle or a handgun. Instead, they spot something equally interesting.
The police found a gray hooded sweatshirt, which matched the description of what the mystery jogger had been wearing.
But that's not all that catches their eye.
When I was looking at the sweatshirt, I could see small specks of a reddish color on the sweatshirt. So I wanted that to be analyzed for blood.
While plenty of people own gray hoodies, how many have one covered in blood red spots?
What's up? Did you go jogging this morning? No. I got enough exercise at work.
Investigators collect the hoodie to send to the crime lab for testing. If the spots are blood, Billy will have a lot of explaining to do. Police ask Billy to come to the station later that afternoon so they can get fingerprints and hair samples. Knowing full well the estranged husband had no business in Debbie's brand new car.
Sure, I'll stop by.
Then, detectives move on to a delicate subject.
How have things been going with your wife? I understand you were separated.
Yeah, we had been separated for a while, but we were working it out. She was going to come back.
He told us that around Christmas time, he and Debbie had talked, and she told him that she wanted to come home and would be coming home and bring the girls.
Billy was adamant that they would reconcile and be one happy family again.
Were you seeing anybody else?
No. No, she really went for me.
What about Debbie? Was she seeing anyone?
She seen some guy named Brian, but she was gonna end her.
Billy acknowledged to the police that he knew his wife was seeing a man by the name of Brian McGinnis.
Billy knew that Debbie was dating Brian because Billy's best friend, Zeke, lived in the same neighborhood as Brian.
But she was gonna end it.
Detectives now have a new person of interest to focus on.
You know Brian's last name?
Yes.
Once Billy told us about Brian, we were anxious to talk with him.
Was Debbie murdered by a jilted lover, or a jealous husband, or someone else entirely?
Nothing about this case was easy.
People with type 2 diabetes are excited about the potential of once-weekly Ozempic. In a study with Ozempic, a majority of adults lowered their blood sugar and reached an A1C of less than 7 and maintained.
Oh, under 7.
And you may lose weight. In the same 1-year study, adults lost on average up to 12 pounds.
Oh, up to 12 pounds.
A 2-year study showed that Ozempic does not increase the risk of major cardiovascular events like heart attack, stroke, or death.
Oh, no increased risk.
Ozempic should not be the first medicine for treating diabetes or for people with type 1 diabetes or diabetic ketoacidosis. Do not share needles or bags. Don't reuse needles. Do not take Ozempic if you have a personal or family history of medullary thyroid cancer, multiple endocrine neoplasia syndrome type 2, or if you are allergic to Ozempic. Stop taking Ozempic and get medical help right away if you get a lump or swelling in your neck, severe stomach pain, itching, rash, or trouble breathing. Serious side effects may happen, including pancreatitis. Tell your doctor if you have diabetic retinopathy or vision changes. Taking Ozempic with a sulfonylurea or insulin may increase the risk for low blood sugar. Common side effects are nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, stomach pain, and constipation. Some side effects can lead to dehydration, which may worsen kidney problems.
I discovered the potential with Ozempic.
If eligible, you may pay as little as $25 per prescription. Ask your healthcare provider today about once-weekly Ozempic.
This summer, book 2 separate qualifying stays at choicehotels.com and earn a $50 gift card. Because when your business is rewarding yourself, our business is you. Book direct at choicehotels.com.
I feel there's always been a darkness to Moscow.
Tonight, somebody had come to her house and shot her in the face. We saw some footprints laying on the bank. The shoe literally fit, and we found her Cinderella.
So in real life, they don't go to reveal a motive, which was very shocking and surprising.
Heartland, only tonight at 10. Only on ID and ID Go. Tara Kelly and Christina Ganstead are back in business for a brand new season of Flip or Flop.
I feel like we're starting a brand new chapter.
Don't miss the season premiere of Flip or Flop, Thursday, August 1st at 9 on HGTV and HGTV Go.
It was an incredible story.
Everybody's on the edge of their seats.
This is the guy everybody's looking for.
Jeanette, you're out there. Come back.
There's no evidence. There's no body. How is this possible?
No one should be able to get away with murder.
It's a very typical northwest forested area.
There's an extensive amount of trails.
Many bodies have been dumped. Could this be the start of a serial killer?
He was taking pleasure in how she was going to be displayed when she was discovered. It's time to go get this monster.
Wonderland Murders, whole new season, Wednesday at 9. Only on ID and ID Go.
In January of 1992, just 12 hours after Debbie Fagan was found shot in the head and possibly raped, news is spreading like wildfire throughout the peaceful town of Monrovia, Maryland.
Neighbors were surprised by Debbie's murder, and I think grew a little uneasy when there wasn't an immediate arrest.
Those closest to her are heartbroken.
It was really just a little hard to believe. I think you were mad. It was just very difficult hearing that.
Push it down, push it down.
In search for a motive, investigators have uncovered a war crime
I feel
In this situation, police would have to look at Billy Sr.
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 3.
also have to look
1,
at
2,
the
3,
current
1, 2,
boyfriend,
3,
Brian.
3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 3.
turns out whoever shot Debbie wasn't taking any chances.
The autopsy found that Debbie had been shot twice in her right temple, and that it was from a very close range. Either one of those shots would have been fatal.
But that's not all they learned.
There was no indication that there was any sexual assault or sexual contact during this homicide.
With rape and robbery ruled out, this all but confirms that Debbie's murder was somehow personal. And who could have a stronger personal motive than a jealous husband or a new lover?
We were anxious to talk to Brian to find out the status of the relationship.
Luckily, Neve doesn't have to wait long. That evening, Brian walks right into the sheriff's office. He heard the tragic news from Debbie's sister.
Brian was very emotional, very upset.
Brian, what was your relationship with Debbie?
Brian says he's been seeing Debbie the past 4 months, ever since she left her husband.
Was she leaving for you? No. It wasn't anything like that.
Brian and Debbie first met at a party, actually, where she had been attending with Billy Sr.
The gathering was at their mutual friend Zeke's house. He happens to be Brian's neighbor and Billy's best friend.
Billy left early, so Debbie and Brian struck up a conversation.
30 minutes into their chat, Brian admits he was smitten.
But he knew that she was married at the time, so he did not consider her as someone that he could date.
But as luck would have it, it was only a matter of days before Debbie had separated from Billy.
In a small town like Monrovia, people's marital status is the bread and butter of town gossip. So Brian was able to hear it through other people in short order that Debbie was looking to move on.
So I asked her out. She said yes, and we've been inseparable ever since.
Brian felt their relationship was growing. It was really blossoming, and they felt happy with each other.
He said he and Debbie were thinking about moving in together and even talking about marriage down the road.
It's a romantic story, but it doesn't exactly jive with what Debbie's ex Billy told them.
Billy indicated that the relationship was over and Debbie was coming home and bringing the girls and coming back to him.
If Debbie's relationship with Brian had soured, as Billy claimed it had, that might give Brian a motive to have some anger towards Debbie.
You own any guns, or do you have any guns? I've never owned a gun.
Did you spend any time with Debbie over the past few days?
Brian told police that the last time he saw Debbie was the weekend when she had come down to his house in Albany, Maryland, to introduce the girls to his home and to him and to spend some time there.
Brian says on Sunday they met his buddy, Greg Ryan, for brunch.
Sunday night we talked. Didn't get already around 6:30 this morning? I'm dead, asleep. And I got up and went to work.
Brian's alibi being alone, there was no way of corroborating or verifying that he was actually at the house.
Detectives asked Brian to be fingerprinted and give a hair sample. The next day, detectives plan to probe a little deeper into their two persons of interest, and they start with the husband, Billy.
Billy had told us that he had left the house and went to work that morning, so we wanted to speak with co-workers to verify that he was on the job site.
And when Detective Meade talks with Billy's boss, it seems his story checks out.
Billy's employer indicated that Billy had gotten to work late that day.
The
lot of stuff going on.
You got an excellent job, boy. Hey, Billy, how's it going, bro?
Oh, I am so sorry, man. Traffic was terrible. He said that there was an accident on the way down. He apologized for being late. He still seemed to be in good spirits and was joking and talking with the guys when he got to the job site.
If Billy had in fact just murdered his wife, he certainly had kept his nerves under wraps. But still, he was late to work, and that sticks with detectives.
I corroborated that Billy was at work, but that still did not eliminate him as someone as a possible suspect. But he still had time to commit the homicide and get to work.
Investigators hope the spots on Billy's hoodie might hold the key, and anxiously check on the results.
We really thought maybe we had the sweatshirt that Billy wore when he murdered his wife.
But when they hear back from the crime lab, it's not what they hoped for.
Those spots did not turn out to be human blood.
There was some kind of a paint substance that was on the sweatshirt, but it was not blood. It was a little disheartening.
If it's not her husband, could the mystery jogger be Debbie's boyfriend, Brian? Detectives head to the office he manages.
I wanted to verify that he did show up to work the day of Debbie's homicide. I wanted to know his demeanor, what was going on with him that day.
Police always want to know how someone's behavior was around the time of a crime such as this. If they act a certain way every other day and then something changes in their routine, that's significant.
I also wanted to find out from all the employees whether they knew whether Brian had any firearms or not, and they all indicated that they weren't aware of owning any firearms. Brian's employees said that Brian showed up that morning as he normally does. Everything seemed normal, nothing seemed different or unusual.
But gradually, everyone noticed something was up with the boss.
He told other employees that Debbie did not call him when she got to work. That was unusual. She always called him when he got to work.
Brian made quite a show of trying to reach Debbie.
God, I hope she's all right.
But she didn't answer.
As the day went on and she didn't call him, he became more anxious and more concerned.
Was Brian really that worried about not hearing from Debbie? Or was it all a show? Because he knew why Debbie couldn't possibly call. As the sun sets on the second day of the investigation, police are no closer to solving Debbie's murder. But while interviewing Debbie's friends and family, a third person of interest materializes. Debbie's stepson, Billy Jr. Turns out
That's what
he
I
had an
said.
axe to grind with Debbie.
When they showed up there and he didn't fall apart, I said, we showed from the beginning.
He was to attend school that September.
But it seems Billy Jr.'s future plans were recently dashed.
Their investigation revealed that at a party, Billy said some very awful things about Debbie.
Billy Jr. was very upset that he wasn't going to call him, and he said that bitch has the money and could send me, but she won't.
Had Billy Jr. been enraged to the point of violence?
A statement like that would certainly make the police concerned.
Get more Nightmare Next Door online at investigationdiscovery.com.
What you're doing is not just hurting you. If you can't make up your mind to quit for yourself, do it for those who love you.
For free help, call 1-800-QUIT-NOW.
When you shop for your home at Wayfair, you get more than free shipping. You get everything you need for your home at a great price. The way it works best for you. I'll take that in, honey. No, when you want it. You get a delivery experience you can always count on. You get your perfect finds at a price to match on your own schedule. You get fast and free shipping on the things that make your home feel like you. That's what you get when you've got Wayfair. So shop now.
Being with Angie's List, because we can always find great local
For any type of home.
It sounds like I use Angie's List because it's free.
Free reviews.
Check their ratings. They can even match my project with qualified firms.
Go to Angie's List today.
Well, it finally happened, Jackie. Somebody burned down my she shed.
Nobody burned down the she shed, Cheryl.
Well, the she shed's on fire.
The she shed was struck by lightning.
Jackie, it's my she shed covered by State Farm.
Your she shed's covered, Cheryl.
You hear that, Victor? I'm getting a new she shed.
She shed?
Mm-hmm.
That's wonderful news.
Home insurance trusted by more people than any other. State Farm.
Not getting enough cash back with that credit card? Turn to the nerds. Are your credit cards working hard enough for you? At NerdWallet, we sort through hundreds of credit cards to find you the lowest rates and the sweetest perks, like balance transfers and travel. Using your preferences to narrow your search, NerdWallet makes it easy to compare and find the perfect card for you. Need the right credit card? Turn to the nerds at nerdwallet.com.
Yeah.
There are millions of women dealing with incontinence who know just how this feels. I recommend my patients use Attain, an easy-to-use and highly effective at-home device.